Have you ever wondered about the magic that happens inside your bread dough, transforming a dense, sticky lump into a light, hairy, and delicious loaf? It's not magic, it's science. And today, we're going to dive deep into the fascinating world of bread leavening. So, grab a cup of coffee, maybe a slice of toast, and let's get started. At the heart of almost every great loaf of bread is a tiny, single-celled fungus called yeast. Specifically, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Now, I know that sounds like a mouthful, but its name literally means sugar-eating fungus, and that's exactly what it does. Yeast is a living organism, and just like us, it needs food to live and thrive. Its favorite food, sugar. When you mix flour, water, salt, and yeast to make dough, you're essentially creating the perfect environment for these little guys. Flour, especially wheat flour, contains starch. The water you add activates enzymes in the flour, which start breaking down that starch into simpler sugars. This is the buffet table for our hungry yeast. Once the yeast starts feasting on these sugars, a process called fermentation begins. During fermentation, yeast consumes the sugar and produces two main byproducts, ethanol, which is a type of alcohol, and carbon dioxide gas. The ethanol mostly evaporates during baking, but it contributes to that wonderful, complex flavor of freshly baked bread. The real star of the show, though, is the carbon dioxide. Think of it like blowing up thousands of tiny balloons inside your dough. As the yeast releases carbon dioxide, this gas gets trapped within the dough's structure, forming little bubbles or pockets. These pockets are what cause the dough to expand, to rise, and to become light and airy. Without yeast, your bread would be more like a flat, dense cracker. But wait, how does the gas get trapped? This is where gluten comes in. When you mix flour with water and begin to knead it, two proteins in the flour, glutenin and gliadin, link together to form an elastic network called gluten. Imagine a super stretchy, interconnected net. This gluten network is what provides the structure for your dough. It's strong enough and flexible enough to trap the carbon dioxide gas produced by the yeast, allowing those bubbles to expand without escaping. Kneading is crucial because it helps develop this gluten network. As you push, fold, and stretch the dough, you're aligning those protein strands, making the network stronger and more elastic. A well-developed gluten network can hold a lot of gas, which means a better rise and a lighter, chewier texture in your final loaf. This is why under-kneaded dough often results in a dense, tight crumb. So, we have yeast eating sugar, producing carbon dioxide gas, and we have a gluten network trapping that gas. This is the primary rising phase, often called the bulk fermentation or the first proof. During this time, you'll see your dough visibly increase in size, sometimes doubling or even tripling. Temperature plays a huge role here. Yeast is a bit like Goldilocks, it doesn't like it too cold or too hot. If the dough is too cold, the yeast will be sluggish and fermentation will slow down dramatically. If it's too hot, the yeast can become overactive and produce off flavors, or even die off completely. The ideal temperature for most bread dough is a cozy room temperature, somewhere around 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, or 24 to 27 degrees Celsius. This is the sweet spot where the yeast is happy and active, producing gas at a steady, controllable rate. After the first rise, most recipes will tell you to punch down the dough. This sounds a bit aggressive, but it serves a few important purposes. First, it expels some of the large, and even pockets of carbon dioxide, redistributing the gas for a more uniform crumb structure. Second, it redistributes the yeast and the sugars, giving the yeast a fresh food supply. And finally, it helps to further strengthen the gluten network. Following this, you'll shape your dough into its final form: a loaf, a boule, a baguette, whatever you're making. This is followed by the second rise, or the final proof. During this stage, the yeast gets back to work, producing more carbon dioxide and inflating the shaped dough one last time before it hits the oven. This final proof is critical for achieving that last bit of volume and a light texture. If you underproof, the bread won't have reached its full potential. If you overproof, the gluten structure can weaken and collapse, leading to a flat, dense loaf. Now, let's talk about what happens in the oven. The moment your dough hits the heat, a few dramatic things occur almost simultaneously. First, you get what's called oven spring. The intense heat causes a rapid burst of activity from the yeast. They go into a feeding frenzy, producing a final, powerful puff of carbon dioxide before the high temperatures kill them off. At the same time, the heat causes the trapped gas and water vapor within the dough to expand rapidly. This combined effect gives the bread one last significant lift, creating that beautiful, domed shape. As the internal temperature of the bread continues to rise, the gluten network and the starches begin to set. Around 140 degrees Fahrenheit, or 60 degrees Celsius, the starches gelatinize, absorbing water and firming up. A little higher, and the gluten proteins coagulate and solidify. This is when the dough transforms from a soft, pliable mass into the stable, spongy structure of bread. The structure that was once held by a flexible gluten network is now permanently set. Finally, we have the browning of the crust. This is thanks to something called the Maillard reaction. At high temperatures, the sugars and amino acids on the surface of the dough react, creating hundreds of new flavor and aroma compounds. This is what gives the crust its deep brown color, its toasty, nutty flavor, and its irresistible smell. So, to recap the journey, we start with yeast, a living organism that eats sugar. This process, fermentation, creates carbon dioxide gas. The gluten network, developed by kneading flour and water, traps this gas, causing the dough to rise. After a first rise and shaping, a second rise gives the bread its final volume. Then, in the oven, a final burst of yeast activity and expanding gases creates oven spring, before the heat sets the starches and gluten, and the Maillard reaction creates a delicious, golden brown crust. It's an incredible process, a beautiful dance between biology, chemistry, and physics, all happening right in your kitchen. And while yeast is the most common leavener, it's not the only one. Sourdough starters, for example, use a symbiotic culture of wild yeasts and lactic acid bacteria to leaven bread, which adds a whole other layer of complexity and that classic tangy flavor. Chemical leaveners like baking soda and baking powder work much faster by creating a chemical reaction that releases carbon dioxide, which is why they're used in quick breads like muffins and scones. But the slow, patient fermentation of yeast is what gives traditional bread its unique character, its complex flavor, and its satisfying chew. The next time you cut into a warm loaf of bread and see that beautiful, open crumb, you'll know exactly how each one of those little holes got there. It's not magic, it's just the amazing power of yeast. Thanks so much for nerding out about bread with me today. It's a topic I'm truly passionate about. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about the science of cooking and baking, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. Happy baking, and I'll see you in the next one.